different variation on the beginning. Still stupid, but we got it going.
I like the beginning.
Jazz Cabbage Cafe. Here with Rick Thompson and Mr. Hashbash, Adam Brook.
I know.
And you are Jamie Lowell?
I am Jamie Lowell. We have some awesome sponsors. So let's take a look at them.
Jazz Cabbage Cafe is sponsored by the Botanical Company, Redemption Cannabis, Real Leaf Solutions, Detroit Nutrient Company, and GrowGreenMI.com.
420 promos.
And 420 promos.
Got to get them on that list. I've been saying that for a couple of weeks now. Not the actual 3 or 4 months that I've been saying it, just a couple of weeks. We'll do that soon. I've actually put that in motion a little bit, see if that takes place. So, well, last week we had Jeremy Rapinski. He's a awesome dude who is, along with his wife, really held down the fort in the backyard in their area around Flint, and have kept up a model that just really makes sense and has helped a lot of people, and has offered a lot of education, medicine, connections between people who need it, space for people to network and have fun, and just a system that has just really worked now for several years. They were right at it right after the laws passed, pretty much. So they are pioneers in it, and I think that he offered some great perspective onto the importance of the caregiver system and how that's all developed, and the fact that there's no reason to mess with it. And it was a good discussion with him. Some other people were supposed to come on, they didn't make it. We ended up kind of talking to him for a while, but I'm glad we did, because there was some good stuff there. Unfortunately, we're still going to be talking about the bills.
Did you hear?
And Will, go ahead.
Genesee County today, Genesee Township. Sorry.
Yeah, there's a bad ordinance coming up, a weird ordinance that's been. In fact, what I did hear, if it was the same thing you did, Adam, that they actually already had a first reading.
Yes, something is amiss up in Genesee Township, and it sounds like they might have played fast and loose with some truths, and had a first reading without ever announcing it or putting it on an agenda. Also, it looks like this may be a direct attack on Vehicle City and GC3, as it would make both of those establishments illegal.
Although I think they're not in the exact same township. I don't believe, are they?
I don't think they are. They're only separated by maybe 4 miles, maybe 5 miles straight up Genesee Road. But I believe Genesee Township covers the current location of GC3. Richfield Township, I believe, is the township that covers Vehicle City. I'm a Flint native, and those are all suburbs of Flint, so I'm kind of familiar with that.
I forgot the name of it, but I remember the Vehicle City was like in a differently named.
But these appear to be those cookie cutter ordinances put forth by the Municipal League and the Township Association, and it's unfortunate because they seem to. It's okay for this group to go from township and locale to locale, but if activists came from around the state to each one of those locales, the locales would be bitching that outsiders were trying to intimidate them.
Yeah. So, I'll say this, we've seen all kinds of larger corporations get municipalities to start some of these anti-caregiver regulations in their communities. I believe it's still based on the concept that if we get rid of the caregivers, we will generate more money in our retail locations, which I firmly believe is just not true. When you actively take away someone's caregiver rights or their home cultivation rights, they will never give you a penny of their money, and they'll hate you forever, and so will their children and their children's children. So,
hey, so I think Andy Carson might be talking about the local ordinance that we were just talking about.
He writes, they seemed happy about the language was not good, didn't address outbuildings, made it seem all had to be done in the house.
All right, so he's talking about the state bills, and he's talking about maybe there's more changes to come when it hits the floor of the House, possibly which that can happen. There could be discussion on the bills on the floor. There could be people who offer up amendments. They can get voted on. They can get voted in. And that is all true. So maybe that. Okay, so now he is talking about a township here. All right, on this one. Yep, and that's common in a lot of places. They're opting out, and then there's the various levels of things they choose to do, activity to be involved in, and it's a mess in some places. But,
so for people, I'm sorry, let me just give an explanation to our viewers. For some people who haven't been following Jazz Cabbage Cafe on television or on Alexa, in Michigan, you can designate as a medical marijuana patient, you can designate a caregiver to grow 12 plants for you. Each caregiver can cultivate for up to 5 patients. There's a proposal in the Michigan legislature to trim that from 5 patients to just 1 single patient, along with several other horrible changes, including, go ahead, Jamie.
One of the substitutes might be letting it be 5 patients again, but only having 24 plants, which is in itself its own problem. And again, it's very important for people to understand, without input from the relevant stakeholders, this is still being written by the big money interests, and that's still unacceptable. Doesn't matter.
So currently 60 plants, potentially going to 24. Go ahead, Adam.
Well, and it's just interesting because at no point has somebody explained to them what it takes for their medicine to be made. So these people are arbitrarily changing the number without knowing the mathematics behind it.
So
admitting it.
Yeah, Bradley asks a question about how did the bills do today. Today they had a very important second reading in the House Regulatory Reform Committee, and all of the bills were passed without any discussion amongst the House members and without any testimony taken from citizens, patients, caregivers, or the people affected by it. So although maybe technically legal by rules of the committee, certainly not proper by the judgment of the people.
The whole thing's been screwy. Surprised, last week, surprised they actually didn't just do it under the guise of any other business for the committee and really rub it in, but there's a couple of bright spots in it. This is something that we did expect to happen. We understood the composition. I don't like seeing that there was so much support for it. We were a few of us able to have a conversation with some committee members late in the day yesterday and help to, I think, slow their support and to want to learn more about this and maybe hear from a lot more people who understand this. That was good, but it's on the floor as we expected, and we need the 28 to 30 votes to stop it. I do want to go over what the substitutes basically are. I'm not incredibly familiar with it. I do know that there was the 5 patient because that was then they only got to have 1 patient. So they believe that they're appeasing that by saying, okay, 5, but you can still only have a few plants. Meanwhile, some require more than 12 plants and some might not require that much. Just having the option to do what you need to do for your patients when you need to do it has always worked. But, there's no reason other than they believe that hurting that activity will benefit them. And that remains unacceptable. And language without input from those who are affected is unacceptable.
So the three bills that were voted out today that we're most concerned with, 2 of them affect actual regs controlling caregivers. Another one would create a brand new type of cultivator called a cannabis specialty grower, which is a license type we think is completely unattainable. But the 2 amendments, Jamie, were exactly the same for both bills because they affect one of them, the MMFLA language, which is the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act, and the second one affects the MRTMA, the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act. One is the medical law, one is the adult use law. So the same amendment was applied to both because language is identical in both proposed changes.
That makes sense. All right. And that, okay, again, still doesn't solve the issue. It means they still weren't listening to the problems that we were suggesting, and changes and more language were done without input from those who should be at the table and those who are directly affected. I kind of like what Robin has said, that one of their issues has been that, or what they've claimed is that Robin won't, come to the table and work with them on that and stuff like that. And she wasn't really included. And she's now made that very clear. Meaning her organization, the industry organization, Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, as well as pointed out why would the industry associations get together and negotiate away caregiver and patient rights? You know, those people who are directly affected need to be there and be part of the discussions of how it affects their lives. And I thought that made a lot of sense. And I said it last night on Medical Mondays, which was a good show. We had this guy Alex on there who's involved in lobbying and trying to do his angle on all of this. And anyway.
So in reality, though, what we're looking at now is a series of actions being taken by in-state cannabis activist groups that are trying to recruit House members to not support these particular bills. That includes on November 4th, a lobby day, which combines the forces of Michigan's American for Safe Access chapter, Michigan's National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws chapter, the Hero Project, which is a veterans organization, Clean Smoke Initiative, which is a group that helps felons get out of jail and land safely in society when they do. Redemption Foundation's involved in that. Cannabis Caucus of the Michigan Democratic Party. There are multiple organizations there. That has probably going to be over 50 attendees for the lobby day. And then we also have on November 9th a dinner that we're holding exclusively for House representatives, which will be simply to provide education on the cannabis laws and the current state of cannabis in Michigan. It'll be a nonpartisan event where we won't talk about any specific bills. We'll just let the legislators know what the law currently states and how things are going here in Michigan, because the questions that were asked by the lawmakers in the Regulatory Reform Committee were of such a basic level, it implies they simply don't have any kind of knowledge about what we do or how our people survive or how licenses are even awarded.
There's no question about
there's
that.
a whole education component that's necessary.
Yep. And we are being joined here by Patrick Frakes from Rair Cannabis, and he just posted in our comments about no changes to the caregiver system. There are many businesses that do not want to see that. In fact, we just discussed the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, which has over 300 members, and they are actively in opposition. The MCMA has 10 to 12 members. They are of the largest, investors in this new industry, but that's all they are. And they're the ones that want this, and not the rest of the industry, not the caregivers and patients, not the relevant advocacy groups, not the activists. This
Patrick,
is something that, Patrick,
in.
how you doing?
I'm good, and it's something that just, really kind of devastates me, even though I'm a licensed operator. I'm a cannabis consumer my whole life. I had to live in the black market for many years. And then, when I first learned about Michigan's caregiver program, I was not only thrilled that they were given a chance to operate in a legal format, but also at how much good they had done and how many times they helped people without getting any money at all, and how they were really about the cause more than the money. And so, for this to be taken away from them when the state of Michigan has told them for years, you can operate in this capacity, but now because of greedy, operators, we don't want you to have these rights anymore. Everything about it is wrong from what cannabis stands for.
Thank you for saying that. And it's important to know, too, that our history with caregivers in Michigan, for those people who are watching that are outside the state, we've been doing caregiving in Michigan for 12 years. So it's an established policy. We really haven't had any changes to things like the number of patients we've had allowed, the number of plants we've had allowed. It's only now when there's a recreational market, it seems, that there's interest in trying to pare back those numbers. It was never a priority to anyone until these guys came on the scene. So it seems very transparently an effort to make more money for their retail locations.
So people see what I have scrolling down here at the bottom, and Jared Jeffries and others and Jen Bronson are kind of making sure people are very aware of this lobby day. And this site is where you can sign up for it.
Read the names. Our audio-only customers on Alexa and Spotify.
www.minorml.org/no changes. And you can sign up there for lobby day. And there's a schedule of events. We'll meet at the business offices near about a block away from the Capitol building. There'll be some time to network a little bit, meet each other, discuss how it's going to go down, how the meetings are going to take place. There are some meetings being scheduled Jared Jeffries is been very significant in conducting all of this stuff and organizing it and getting it ready. And then we'll have the lobby day. We'll be able to present really good information to many lawmakers and hopefully, get their support in opposition. At that point, it takes us 28 to 30 votes to stop this. We've said this a lot. It requires a supermajority to pass because it was a People's Act that's being amended. And that makes our job a little bit easier, but we are up against a very formidable challenge.
I'll say this. In Michigan, we have a 2-year legislative cycle, which means bills introduced in 2021 could also be voted on all the way down to 2022. So whomever has the chimes, can you please mute when you're not speaking? Because that's really distracting. So, it's possible that we may not be able to get a vote in the House of Representatives until mid next year because they'd be trying to let our work die down so that they can use lobbying efforts to put bad thoughts back into legislators' minds. So our commitment has to be an ongoing one. We've been doing this for a long time, but it seems like the next 12 months might be some of the most significant time that we've spent in Michigan's law reform history.
Well, there might be counts that take place, and there might be a standing, we can't pass this right now, and continuing working on these people, though, and some people might flip. This happens each way, unfortunately, quite frequently. There are a lot of people who are just learning about this issue right now, and, a lot of things sound good to them, especially this common tactic of creating this false hysteria by saying there's a health concern, and people are feeding right into that, and that's how it works. So that's not uncommon. And unfortunately, we're finding ourselves on the side of it working. There's a lot of people because of term limits that haven't been around and haven't really been subject to these types of discussions that we're now starting to have again, and the type of lobbying that we're starting to do again. And it's just a real challenge. And then after all this, we can stave it off for a year. It may go into lame duck where we have no public input, where a lot of negotiations take place and where they could be in the mix. So this whole thing is scary until the end of the session, and it's going to be really tough to stave it off. 2022
is an election year also, so that adds additional dynamic to the whole negotiation. Patrick, here on our show, we've had a series of regulated licensees here in Michigan, like Tom Beller from Real Leaf Solutions and other guys who've come on to say that they really do not support the bills, that they do support the caregiver perspective. But it's true that sometimes people just look at all businesses as exactly the same, and you're oftentimes treated by the actions of your worst members. Don't you think that it's tough to identify yourself as a pro-caregiver location, considering all of the heat that's been on businesses today?
It is tough. And, it really is frustrating for me. That's why I'm very vocal anytime I get the opportunity to bring it up, not just on shows like this, but also just talking with other people. I have so many friends that are still active caregivers in the first place, so it's important for them to know that I'm on their side. And I've never once felt like I was competing against the caregivers. They serve a very important purpose in the cannabis community. And my competition has always been licensed operators and only licensed operators. And I've always felt like, even before I was in the cannabis space, it's not my job to compete against other groups. It's my job to do right by whatever service and product I'm providing. And if I'm putting a good product out there and providing good service to the people supporting our businesses, that's all I care about. I never thought that I would be trying to come to Michigan to corner the market in cannabis. The conversation is actually ridiculous. And we all here know that the caregiver community, home grows, things like that will continue and should continue. Everybody's life is different. Cannabis should be a part of people's lives. Then that's a personal opinion, but I feel like everybody can benefit from cannabis in one form or another, even if it's CBD, even if it's topicals, and not everybody has got an unlimited paycheck. So, I am a recent, and this may be breaking news to you guys, I don't know, but I'm a recent survivor of cancer. I was diagnosed with renal cell carcinoma, kidney cancer. Thankfully, it was caught early. And so I'm one of the lucky ones. But, immediately I went to my Rick Simpson oil and started taking it daily, not just smoking and taking edibles, because realizing how real this is, and people that are suffering from cancer much worse than I did need support. They don't need to be worrying about driving around town to the dispensary and finding out what the local deals are and if they have a product that really can benefit them, because a lot of people don't carry Rick Simpson oil. So it's very important that they have access. And the stories that go on in Michigan and really all throughout the country is heroic. I mean, these caregivers should be considered as heroes. Not all of them are heroic, obviously, but there's so many great stories about caregivers going out of their way, driving hours to bring the cannabis, bring Rick Simpson oil to people that have cancer and are laid up in their bed. And to think that those people are being challenged right now and making their lives worse is the real tragedy here.
And caregivers are, of course, the target of this. But what we're really talking about is a loss of patient access to cannabis. Just to break down the numbers for our viewers that may not be familiar, in Michigan, there are 30,000 registered caregivers. Again, with the ability to care for 5 patients, they could take care of up to 150,000 patients. But really, they're only registered to take care of about 72,000. So that's about half of what the current capacity for the caregiver market is in the regulated sense. But if these bills pass, those 30,000 caregivers will only be able to take care of a single patient each. Now, 72 minus 30 is 42,000 orphaned patients. And as Patrick just mentioned, and runs some incredibly successful cannabis retail operations in the state. In fact, they just announced a licensing deal with NBA All-Star champion Ben Wallace. So this is a big-time group. Not every retailer has the medicinal strains of cannabis that are going to be needed. And some of them are so specialized that they can really only be crafted by someone who knows the patient and has selected certain plants in order to make that medicine. You have to appreciate how difficult it is to make Rick Simpson oil and how specific the effects are from a plant-based focus. So this is not just something that you can pick up at any location. I oftentimes think, too, that when people look at plant counts, they're imagining dried flower and pre-rolls and how many you could make out of that. But Rick Simpson oil is incredibly intensive as far as how much cannabis product is needed in order to produce a medicinal quantity. Patrick, if you don't mind me asking, what was your dosage of RSO in order to resolve your cancer issue?
Well, I got it from the Stone Depot. There's a little plug for that business, but one of the good guys in the industry for sure. I have been basically taking about, I would say it's about, I want to say about 100 milligrams a day. But it's really being done through two separate drop, squirts under the tongue. So I'm taking about 50 in the morning and 50 at night. And my tolerance is high because I've been a user my whole life. But, I have found that 10 milligrams, 20 milligrams doesn't really do a lot for me. But, as I even consulted with my oncologist, with my urology oncologist, he talked about he is a pro cannabis doctor, which I was really excited about and kind of looking for when I was looking for my treatment. And he also reiterated the fact that Rick Simpson oil has an ability to really attack the cancer cells much different in a way than smoking or edibles does. And so that obviously is something that is very beneficial for anybody that's got cancer, something I'm still learning about, very, very much a new student in this regard. I was blindsided on June 1st with the announcement that I had had cancer, and just had the tumor removed on August 27th. So all still very new to me.
Well, and how Rick Simpson oil, this is my understanding of how Rick Simpson oil works with tumors, is it induces apoptosis in those tumor cells. What that is it inspires each individual cell to die. So slowly shrinks the tumor by killing the individual tumor cells itself and targeting only the tumor cells. Rick Simpson oil itself, generally speaking, gives a lot of additional health benefits. And I have to believe that when your body has all those extra cannabinoids floating around in there, satisfying that endocannabinoid system, that it's probably going to help your system fight off the cancer as well. I'm not sure if you covered that with your oncologist.
No, it did. And certainly that is something that is huge on my mind right now, is not wanting it to come back. Thankfully, kidney cancer, renal cell carcinoma is exactly what I had, but is not have a high probability of return, but something I don't want to take any chances with for sure.
Wow. So when we hear stories of survivors and people that have used cannabis medicines to arrest their illnesses, regardless of whether it is lupus or multiple sclerosis or cancer, when we hear these stories, we need to be able to get these messages out to the House representatives that are potentially going to vote. Appearing here on Jazz Cabbage Cafe is a really good first step because, as a public broadcast, we frequently have small clips that are taken out and shared with the public in different ways. And I think, Patrick, your story is another one of those arrows that we have in our quiver that we can potentially offer to lawmakers as proof that we need to maintain the caregiver system as it currently is.
Absolutely. Cancer is the best argument. There's many great arguments and many real ailments that are out there. But I think everybody has been affected by it with friends or family one way or another. And we understand how dire it can be. And I have seen one of the real reasons I first decided to dedicate my life in a business capacity to cannabis was because my father would not try cannabis when he had pancreatic cancer. And his last months were tougher than my mother, who had esophageal cancer and lymphoma. But she used cannabis and used Rick Simpson oil, used edibles, and had a quality of life up until her final day that did not exist otherwise. So this is something, it's great that it can be life-saving in areas as well, but it's also important that the quality of life is there for the cannabis patient, even if they are terminal.
Right on. And Patrick, you brought up that you worked with a store to get a hold of some material, and that's cool. That's available from time to time. That's not everywhere, and when it is, it's not typically cost effective for many of the people who need it. Now you sit in a position where you could go there and get it and work with them and have it, but that's not something that's available to everybody. No. And the caregiver does need to provide it so that the correct thing in a way that can be continuously supplied has to be the case in order for it to be effective. I just want to point that out. I mean,
right. I called my man Ryan Basor, and he told me that they had it at the Stone Depot. Get your butt over there. So I just went straight over right after the accident and got it before I even, really had first day out of the hospital.
If you don't mind me asking, typically Rick Simpson oil is dispensed in a syringe or a tube. What's the average cost on a retail level for that tube?
I want to say it was $49, but I'm not 100% certain. It was either $39 or for a gram.
For a 1 gram.
Yeah.
That's every day for some of the treatments.
Right.
There are treatment programs that do ask you to have 1 gram of Rick Simpson oil per day and $50 a day.
Or
although it's
or 60 within 90 days, depends on
Yeah.
Right. No, it's not attainable. And for me, obviously I'm lucky that I'm not broke, but Richard says he wants what I'm smoking. That's pretty good. I love the comments. But I certainly understand wholeheartedly how important it is. And again, I feel sort of guilty when I mention myself as a cancer survivor because I was I had an incidental finding through a car accident. And so I was stage 1, and this was a real blessing for me, and did not have the suffering that most cancer patients have. I mean, I had a surgery that put a bunch of holes in my stomach, and it was no fun, but very blessed that I was able to locate it while it was stage 1 before it could spread.
That is very cool. I want to get caught up here just a little bit. Jorge Julio asked a little bit ago if it takes 2/3 of vote to pass these bills. And it actually requires more than that. It requires a supermajority or 75% to pass these bills, which sounds like it might be insurmountable. But the problem is, it is not. It's happened before, and there are a lot of indications that there's way too many. We're hovering around the number that we need to stop it right now, and some of those people are very vulnerable to being flipped. This is a very serious challenge. We need as much help as possible. Again, check out that website right there and sign up for our lobby day, if nothing else, to help out. And that would be pretty good. And then somebody asked about Simpson oil as it pertains to edibles, and of course, Simpson oil is an extraction, and many different types of extractions are infused into edibles. That one typically has a full spectrum of a lot of the components of the plant, and is preferred by a lot of people. And so that's what it would be. You could take it in a capsule form or as it is, or it could be in some food, just like a lot of those. So
I think those are two complementary medicines. They're not exclusionary. You could do both medibles and Rick Simpson oil. I think most people who
Right.
are just looking for a daily health benefit would eat a medible a day, a couple of gummies, things like that. If you're trying to go to sleep at night, or if you have some exciting gummies, you can have some early in the day. But if you're treating a specific illness or ailment, then Rick Simpson oil is typically the way that we go as a harder smack against those diseases.
right on. And again, this is kind of the stuff that a lot of people don't know about. We have a whole new group of people in the legislature, and we're finding out that there's a lot of missing information, incomplete information, a lot of great intention. Even those who kind of seem as though they might, have some ulterior motive for not necessarily being squarely behind us. Oftentimes we're finding out it's just because they don't have enough information.
Yeah. Susan Fisher's in the comments, and she's a stage 4 cancer. So we have all kinds of people that pay attention to Jazz Cabbage Cafe and that utilize cannabis and need that information. Susan writes that Rick Simpson oil helps her with her neuroendocrine cancer and the GI cancer. And she advises everyone to get a colonoscopy soon if you have problems with your GI tract. How do I know if I have problems with my GI tract? Ugh.
I think when you're over 50, you get those anyway. So
When that happens, I'll have to say.
Yeah. You should have had about 4 of them already.
Shut up. And can you go back to the last comment about having to return to opioids, please, Jamie? You're doing such a great job with these. The Mikey says, I'll have to go back to opioids for pain if this bill passes. And that's a real concern because many people use cannabis to remove the pharmaceuticals from their lives. But there are just some things that even cannabis can't accomplish, and that pharmaceuticals, maybe in conjunction with cannabis or instead of cannabis, sometimes that's necessary as well. Even with my migraine headaches, there are some times when I absolutely have to go to the opioids, and it has all kinds of health consequences for me, but there are times I just got to do it. So.
Well, I thought it was fascinating when I got out of surgery, they gave me a prescription for oxycodone. And, I was in a lot of pain right away the first 2 days. And I took it, was trying to do anything I could to relieve the pain. But after the second day, the start of day 3, I stopped taking it and simply went to edibles, smoking a little bit. It was in my stomach, so I was really trying not to cough. But I was taking the edibles, taking Rick Simpson oil, and by removing the oxycodone from the prescriptions, I felt much better. I was still able to sleep. I still felt pain reduction when I would take the Rick Simpson oil or the edible. But while the pain reduction maybe wasn't as great as was with oxycodone, the side effects of the oxy was just annoying. And, it just proves why I've loved cannabis for so long, because it doesn't have those side effects. And I thought it was an incredible test case for me personally, because I hate pills and never take pills if I don't have to. And I still have 8 of these things sitting in my counter now. And, they're going to be thrown away because they're no good.
Yep, take them down to your local police station and have them properly disposed so they don't end up in the waste in our water system. I'll also say that Anton Harb, who's a wonderful veteran advocate with the Hero Project, mentions his personal experience taking what we call a maintenance dose. Oftentimes, people who've had success with Rick Simpson oil continue to use Rick Simpson on a regular basis in order to prevent that illness from coming back, whether it's a tumor, whether it's the symptoms of MS or whatever. So there's a reason why people would be on Rick Simpson regularly, not just when they're ill. And that means that's a really expensive way to live your life if your only source of Rick Simpson is the retail locations. We have to maintain the caregiver system as it's currently written, because these compromises to the caregiver system they're proposing in the House Jamie Lowell, we've seen this before. You make a deal with somebody in the House, and then a senator comes in and just wipes out the whole deal that you did, and there's no recourse. Now they go right back to where they were, and all of a sudden the bill's passed in its horrible form. So, I mean,
just to discuss that a little bit and maybe reiterate, because I'm sure we've discussed it many times. These bills were written by the big money interests. There was no input from the caregivers and the patients and the other people directly affected by this. And so the idea is to get some others to understand that. And many people are understanding that the process is unfair, that those who are trying to advantage themselves shouldn't be dictating the policies or creating the basis for the discussion. And it's not like we are not interested in having these discussions on very important, questions about what to do, what are issues, how do you handle them, and all that kind of stuff. But it just should be done in the course of a fair process where everybody who has meaningful input is at the table. And that really shouldn't be too much to ask, unless you're trying to advantage yourself and not allow that fair process to happen.
And in Michigan, we have so many voices, not just the people on this program, Anquinette Sarfo, Robin Snyder from the MICIA, Patrick himself, Russ Chambers from Botanical Company. Thanks for joining us today, Russ. We have so many great advocates that they could reach out to. There's no shortage of people to talk to who know more about cannabis than the lawmakers. It's really intentional ignorance, right? If it's all out there and you're choosing not to look at it, especially if you're responsible for making laws that govern us, then you're intentionally not learning it. And that's wrong. That's wrong. Patrick, I know you said you called Ryan Basor. What a great guy. His business with Redemption Cannabis really does help to, there are so many charities that it benefits. At Rair Cannabis, you also do some philanthropic things too, don't you?
Well, we work with Ryan, obviously, through the Redemption brand. We're very proud to be one of his selected cultivators, and knowing, of course, if you're a cannabis user for many years, like myself, I've had a couple of run-ins with the law that, should have never happened because cannabis should have never been illegal. But, it's really important for me, too, personally, to support the Redemption Foundation, Last Prisoner Project, things like that. I don't want to break any other news, but looking to work with Anquinette as well. Anquinette and I have become good friends, and I'd like to see ways to participate in helping her in some of the great causes she's a part of, for sure.
Anquinette Sarfa is a Michigan cannabis legend. I guess maybe a figure would be a better way to say it. She was a former Fox 2 News anchor who became an ill person, had to leave her job in broadcast news in order to treat her illness, used cannabis to get herself off of all the pharmaceuticals that she was on and also to resolve her health issues. And now she's an advocate and spokesperson for the cannabis industry. She's had several different businesses in the system, and she's on the board of directors of NORML of Michigan, along with Adam Brook and myself. So talk about somebody who's really taken their personal experience and then really used it as a springboard to specific advocacy. She's a great example of someone who's made a big difference in the minds of Michigan citizens. Because she had such a big reach from her former life as a broadcaster, she's really used that platform to best purpose. Don't you think, Patrick?
Absolutely. And that's why I really sought her out through the MICIA in the very beginning, because I could see, she had such a passion about her story and about her efforts and advocacy, and same with you guys too. Obviously, I was seeking you guys out, wanting to connect with you guys and become your friends, because it was so clear to me that you were the real voice of reason when we're talking about transitioning from an illegal, illicit market into the legalized market. We need your voices. They need to be heard, because if you leave this up to a bunch of regulators and politicians that don't know what the hell they're talking about, you get things like that where greed rules the day. And I've been very proud of Michigan in many ways, the way they have regulated this program. And this, I think, would be a real step backwards. And you know, back to that super majority, I mean, I don't want to take it for granted, but I really am counting on it and hoping that there's enough common sense in that legislative body that will make sure that there's no changes to the caregiver law.
Well, cash trumps common sense, and unfortunately 2022 is an election year. So if you can make House representatives afraid that they're going to not achieve their seat again, they're going to lose their position if they don't support something erroneously titled the Cannabis Safety Act, Cannabis Caregiver Safety Act, something like that. And let's face it, the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association, which as Jamie described, maybe 10, 12 members, we don't know, it's very shadowy, and they are the largest players in the state. They command millions and millions. And by the way, what's at stake for them? Billions and billions. Our industry in Michigan is slated to potentially reach a 2 billion mark this year, this calendar year alone. And if you look at the projection all the way out to 2025, I mean, even a small improvement in market share could translate to millions and millions of dollars for some of these places. So, but that's still not enough of a motivation for you to betray your caregiver friends, Patrick. I mean, let's face it, you're standing here standing stout, talking about how none of that shit matters. It's about health and wellness of the people in Michigan who are the most sick. And by the way, all of the pediatric patients in Michigan, all the children that are sick and registered in the program, they're required to have caregivers. So anytime you mess with caregivers, you mess with sick kids.
Absolutely. And sorry I used the term illicit market. I did not mean to. Certainly just meant it coming from an illegal aspect to a legal aspect. It's so important that we do this right. And that's why as an operator, you know, I wanted to be involved because I know, you know, unfortunately, my family has suffered from addiction greatly. And I lost my brother this summer to addiction. And I, as a young man, was able to see that cannabis was something that I could use to help with my stress and anxiety, make me laugh a little bit, but also not ruin my life. You know, it won't make me lose my job. It won't make me not show up for work. It won't make me betray my wife and kids. And, you know, that was why I chose it. Alcoholism and drug addiction were rampant in my family. And it became a slap in the face. And I'm so thankful and unbelievably grateful that cannabis was there for me.
I know a lot of people have used cannabis as an exit strategy from prescription drug abuse and also as an avoidance strategy for alcohol abuse. Jamie Lowell, I know we have a guest you'd like to introduce. Mute, sir.
You're muted, Jamie.
Because he's a pro. All pros do that.
I just wanted to warm up a little bit because an introduction for Zahra deserves. Hey, she does many things, but she is also another board member of Michigan NORML, along with Adam and Rick and Anquinette mentioned earlier today. She's also the chair of the Cannabis Caucus in Michigan. She's like she's a national Democratic delegate, something similar to that. I mean, lots of stuff. It's very involved.
DNC delegate.
She and I have been making lots of contact with lawmakers and trying to gauge where they are on this issue and trying to give them some information. That's why we know they're getting a lot of bad information, and they don't have a good foundation of information of how the different laws work and what the caregiver system actually does and that kind of thing.
And what the effect of reducing the plant count or eliminating the ability to have more than one patient will do to some people.
That is correct. So, hey Patrick, I want to take a second and you know, and then Zahra will definitely talk a little bit more. I want to get your input on some stuff, but I mean, we have a lot to talk about these bills still, and including, as Latricia pointed out, she says there's 4 bills. I actually think there might be like 6 that we might be.
There are 5 bills tie-barred together.
Okay.
Yes, and then there's one additional bill that's not tie-barred, but it's still part of the package.
Right. Okay. So there's 6 altogether with 5 tie-barred. That was her point, though, that there's more to talk about, and I did kind of want to go over that stuff, but why not take a short break from that and and I'd like to hear about the latest venture with Rair and our former Detroit Piston legend, Big Ben Wallace. I saw the promotions for that, and it looked really cool, and I'm a huge fan, so definitely interested in hearing about that.
Well, it's super exciting for us as a brand. You know, we're again, we called ourselves Rair because we're trying to be different from the rest of a lot of these guys. We're about the cannabis community, and you know, celebrity endorsement deals had been offered to us in the past that we really didn't feel were genuine. And I thought it was so exciting because I met Ben personally through a friend, and you know, just asked him to come tour the facility. So the whole thing grew, no pun intended, or maybe it is, organically. But you know, we really struck up a friendship. I found Ben to be very much like he was as a player. He's, you know, understated and overperforms. He's an unbelievably genuine human being. He really loves his wife, kids. He really loves, you know, giving back to the community and participating in Detroit. And he really feels a passion for what cannabis can do for not just Detroit, but Michiganders in general, and wanted to be involved in the process. I know he had done a couple of things with cannabis in the past, but he is someone we have found a very good alliance with, and we share a lot of similar goals in this industry. So obviously it's great for us to get the attention of being associated with somebody like Ben Wallace, especially at a time when he's entering the Hall of Fame. He brought Detroit a championship, but you know, his genuine personality and his passion and hard work kind of motto is what really attracted us to do the partnership. We also are right now waiting for approval for a location in Centerline, so we'll finally be in that southeastern Detroit marketplace. So we're really excited about getting into that neck of the woods and bringing Rair products to Detroit and Detroit area.
Centerline, for those that aren't familiar, is about 1 mile north, or 1.5 miles north of the famous 8 Mile, which is the northern border of Detroit. Detroit currently is a medical marijuana only city. They do not authorize adult use or recreational centers. So having something that close to the city line would be very beneficial for the citizens of Detroit.
Well, and we're super proud of everything we've accomplished so far, but still a lot of people don't know about us here. We're not one of the groups that has been puffing our chest out and bragging about having the best cannabis in the state, like so many people love to say. You know, and I still would argue that some of the best product I've seen is caregiver product. So I knew right away how much of a myth that was about caregiver product being dangerous. But you know, it's a super important for us to establish ourselves as a group that's about it for the right reasons. We love cannabis. We love growing great cannabis and want to have great products to offer to the state of Michigan. But it's really important that we give back and we participate in those communities that we're operating and do it the right way. And we're not one of these groups that's just looking to make a buck. We want to survive, be successful. But with success, we feel there's an obligation to give back, because that's what cannabis is about. I love the fact that cannabis has united people from different backgrounds for all of my life that I've been using it. And some of my greatest friendships have been from just stepping outside and smoking a joint with somebody that I didn't know before. And I think cannabis does really unite people at a time when there's more divisive things going on than ever before in our life.
I'd like to point out, too, that during most of the times when Pistons players say that they were using cannabis during that championship run and things like that, there was no medical system in Michigan, and it was all Mr. Hashbash's market, the pre-existing unregulated market that was there before the 2008 medical marijuana law came in. And those people, those athletes, totally, completely believe that using the cannabis they got from that illicit source helped their performance in a way that made injuries easier to tolerate and made gameplay a little bit more easy to accomplish. So we talk a lot about patients and caregivers, but let's just remember all home cultivators, whether registered or not, are performing a valuable service in our community, as far as I'm seeing.
Absolutely.
So that's my thing. Jamie, you're muted again. twice in one
I
show.
wasn't really saying anything. I was kind of agreeing.
No, you're
Nothing of real substance. Of course, I would have
Okay.
obviously remembered to unmute myself if I were going to say something.
Well, I'm super excited to be on the show with Zahra. Am I pronouncing it right? Zahra?
Yep, and you're muted.
It's Zahra, but that's
Zahra.
close.
I've been following you from afar, and I know I've friend requested you on Facebook recently, but super glad to connect with you through this virtual reality.
Well.
So many of us have been trying to make contact with a lot of these lawmakers in anticipation already that the bills would be passed out of committee, and trying to shoot for the votes that we need to stop it from being successful, and had some limited success in getting responses and setting up these meetings. But Zahra's been going at it for a couple of weeks now, and has been very successful in getting a lot of meaningful meetings set up. And it's just been I think very important, this big process with everything going on. What she's been able to kind of line up and get proper information to the right people has been as important as anything. And just does a lot of other great stuff too. So really appreciate that. I just wanted to tag along with Patrick, recognizing how he realizes, that you're doing a lot of stuff out there.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do whatever I can to see where we can go with this situation. But yeah, as Jamie said, we've been getting a lot of good responses so far from some of the lawmakers, and the most important thing is that educating them, because so many of them are misinformed on what these bills actually do and how they affect the patients.
There's no question.
Rick, you're now muted.
I'm just trying to beat Jamie. He did it twice. I want to do it 3 times. Even though he only cops to 1. So we just had a question in the chat about what these bills do. Jamie, the chimes again. If I could say 5300 to 5302 are the ones where the primary changes to caregiver laws are contained. They would reveal all caregiver addresses to local law enforcement upon demand, change the caregiver relationship with patients. There's multiple issues that we have with this. They would also remove the use of flammable solvents in the creation of concentrated medicines, and there really is no chemical alternative to create concentrates with.
This is the crafted medicine that we often refer to, that the caregivers need to be able to provide consistently to their patients who have come to benefit from it and rely on it.
Now, 5319 and 5321 both propose to remove the use tax from caregivers and from the new proposed cannabis specialty grower license. Use tax is something that was imposed by the Michigan Department of Treasury in 2018. Prior to that, they didn't want a damn thing to do with cannabis, and they didn't want you to put it on your tax form or anything. But in Rick Snyder's last year of administration, he said, let's go get them. So they instituted a use tax on caregivers, and have, I suppose, successfully tried to use that as a failure to pay result, which denies caregivers opportunities in the regulated market. The other one, which is 5320, is simply a change in terminology. It's almost a throwaway. They could probably do it, another way, but it has no significant impact on anything. So that's a breakdown of the 6 bills, the 3 package, and then the other 3 that we've been referencing that are really not as important.
Yeah, so our primary thing with any of the lawmakers has been 5300 to 5302, since those are the ones that are really going to do the most effect, or the bad effects to the law.
So when we talk about the effects that they have on the law, we talk about the 42,000 orphans, and that's what we've been referring to them as, the 42,000 patients who will be orphaned by this program. When you're dependent upon cannabis specialty medicines, you cannot easily transition into other types of medicines. The other thing is, you're forcing caregivers to make an inhumane choice. If you are like Anton Harb has mentioned several times, and I'm sure I'm not speaking out of turn when I repeat his story, as a caregiver with 5 veteran patients, 5 vets who have PTSD, who have issues that require the use of cannabis, and now you're forced as a caregiver to cut 4 of those guys loose. And let's also remember that all 30,000 caregivers in Michigan will be locked up. There will be no available caregivers for those 4 to go to, because everybody who wants to be a caregiver already is a caregiver.
Again, one of the substitutes might have allowed for 5 patients again, possibly, but severely restricting plants down to 24. So
that just shows how ill-informed they are.
Right. The discussion is similar in that they can't accommodate all their patients. I mean, that's the same idea.
So it still doesn't work, fellas.
Right.
Yeah.
It still wasn't done with input by those who should be giving it, and the whole thing.
So do you think? I mean, they were probably doing that just to get it passed, because they're probably like, that's one of the arguments that we are using. So, for anybody who does ask, what is your answer to? Well, at least they gave you that. Like, well,
sorry.
Yeah.
All kinds of gangsters have social programs to make themselves look good. Okay. I mean, I was trying to come up with an analogy and I lost the guy's name. The guy from Colombia, George's friend.
Pablo Escobar.
Pablo Escobar was known for feeding the people.
Yeah,
That's why he was so loved by the people. Okay. Every terrorist dictator in the world has some sort of orphanage social program in his country. Mm-hmm. Many of them ended up on gallows or at the end of an American rifle, and nobody went and talked about their social graces after they were dead. So the fact of the matter is that these are carrots that they're putting out to the masses, and anybody that understands what's going on understands that there's no reason for any of these bills to pass. They're not needed. And if they want to add caregiver product to the system, I mean, I'm a high school dropout. I could write that this afternoon, and we could have that done by the end of the week. We don't need all this other nonsense.
And I guess I agree with that, Adam. And I guess another way to look at that is we are not refusing to become part of a valid discussion on what needs to be addressed and how we might go about addressing it. What we are saying is that it has not been done via a fair process so far. So we'd like to be included in a fair process, and that really shouldn't be too much to ask.
I think, too, that when we talk about the danger of making concessions in the House that just get reversed in the Senate, it's very real. We've seen this happen before. Oftentimes people want us to say, well, instead of 60 plants, what if we do 24? Or what if we do 40? Those type of concessions you just can't do, because when you do that, you're not guaranteeing that will remain in place throughout the entire legislative process. And frankly, the Senate is so dominated by Republicans, they can put any language in these bills that they want and get it passed because they already possess a supermajority just within their party. So you're looking at a situation where the people in power want us to negotiate, but they can't provide any guarantees that any of the concessions we make would stick. So what's the value of negotiating? And by the way, we're not open for negotiating anyway. The closed sign is pretty much on our front door for that.
Yeah, well, and I agree with.
Right. Go ahead, Zahra.
I mean, I agree with everything you're saying, but the reason I brought up that question is because I know that's probably the question that's going to get asked right now about these bills.
Correct.
By people who are not.
That's my issue, is that these bills aren't needed. The legislators thought that, because the disingenuous part was these people misrepresented themselves as the industry. So the legislators at first glance see some bills coming that the industry needs some things tightened up. Well, let's work with the industry to tighten those things up. Then they were bombarded by this grassroots effort saying, hey, wait a minute. That's not, first of all, the industry. That's a part of the industry. Second of all, we are not the industry. We never have been the industry. We don't want to be industry. We're caregivers. We're something unique. And
right on.
You can make up all these games all you want, but the caregiver system is separate. It's unique from these other systems we have in Michigan. We already know through Mr. Brisboe and Rick Thompson and whatnot talking about the future, that there's a concept that they're going to meld the two systems together, the medical and the recreational or adult use system. That's fine. They can do that in my book. I don't care.
Depends on how
because
it's
the
done.
caregiver system's still going to remain separate. Okay. Yep. The thing that I worked hard for and that I voted for and that I supported, I don't know that I necessarily supported Prop 1 other than it moved the ball forward.
Right.
This
we still have a long way to go.
Talking about any kind of compromise, it just seems like you'd be asking caregivers to compromise between a cancer patient and a PTSD and a Crohn's disease patient, and that's insanity. There's no common sense to that whatsoever.
The system hasn't caused a problem in its entirety. There's no reason to do anything to it.
We compromised for years while we allowed them to send our family members to prison, and we didn't go blow them up.
And by the way, that includes Mr. Brook himself, who was imprisoned for this plant that we have.
And Adam makes another good point too. You know that the industry doesn't support this either. It's just them.
Yes.
The MICA, and I just want to read that there was a statement that the MICA put out, and it encapsulates some of the discussion that we've already had too. I just wanted to read it for everybody's benefit real quick. Did you want to say something first, Adam?
No, because I already forgot what I was going to say. So keep moving.
All right. Well, I get to read this, so I can't forget it.
Short-term memory loss.
But there's some good stuff in it, and I want people to know their perspective and why it's very important. The Michigan Cannabis Industry Association urges lawmakers to table House Bills 5300, 5302, and create a transparent and inclusive work group to thoroughly address outstanding concerns related to the voter-initiated Michigan Medical Marijuana Act. As the state's leading cannabis industry association, we strongly oppose this package of bills that are overwhelmingly viewed as harmful to patients and their caregivers. We acknowledge and agree with many patients who have come forward raising concerns with losing their caregivers that they have relied on for over 10 years, affordability barriers, access to specialty craft medicine, and an unnecessary disruption to their healthcare regime. We agree that the recriminalization of currently legal cannabis activity will lead to increased arrests, disproportionately impacting minority communities. We wish to clarify that our association did not participate in the drafting of this legislation, which is something that the MCMA inferred to lawmakers when they were talking to them, as we've been finding out through our many conversations with lawmakers. We wish to clarify our association did not participate in the drafting of this legislation, nor were we provided any drafts prior to introduction. Post-introduction, we have been urged by some lawmakers to negotiate the contents of the bills. While our members have raised many industry-related concerns with the content of the bills, we believe that it would be unethical for our business association to assist with the negotiating away patient health care options.
So I know there's a lot of confusion out there between the two trade associations. We're talking about Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association, Michigan Cannabis Industry Association. Just remember the I's are Y's. The MICIA, that's the good guys. The no I's, the MCMA, the blind dudes. I's are Y's. That's how you remember the difference between the two organizations. Jamie, that was a powerful statement you just read, sir.
Yeah, and it's just got a little bit to finish it off. These bills were drafted without any patient or consumer participation, which is why we propose starting over with an inclusive work group. Medical marijuana patients include many of the state's most sick and vulnerable citizens. They deserve a seat at the drafting table led by lawmakers rather than business lobbyists.
That's perfect. You know, and we're all in on a potential work group. You could select any dozen of our top advocates, and they would love to just jump right in and start from scratch on bills that maybe address concerns that they have on the legislative level. But, you know,
well,
we've done it before.
I do wonder how the MCMA would respond to a group of people going to the legislature and proposing bills that looked into the industry and some of their practices.
Well, they have a lockdown on passing any such bills, so they wouldn't be afraid at all, because they could certainly stop them from ever getting a hearing in committee, because all the committees are controlled by Republican members. So I don't think they would be, but it's a worthy inquiry. Perhaps the Attorney General, who sometimes watches our show, might want to open up an inquiry into some of the some of the issues that Mr. Hashbash raises that Adam talks about.
Well, because my whole goal here is to make marijuana as normal and everyday as any other substance on the planet. And once this industry gets going and all this regulation gets all ironed out and everyone's happy, we're still going to have a little bit to go to where the guys that are breaking the rules and not abiding by the laws are treated, you know, I don't know, respectfully at least. I mean, we're not even to that point yet.
Where there's a civil approach to something that's outside of a limitation instead of like freak out. Right.
A cease and desist letter means a lot to a lot of people. And when it comes from the attorney general or your local prosecutor, you probably are going to pay attention to that. And, you know, that's how things need to be handled. And we got a long way to go for that. And we're going to work out a bunch more bumps in the future, because this is just the beginning.
Well, in this message from MICIA, they refer to the fact that this also would recriminalize activity.
Yeah,
and you choose between who you take care of or take the risk of continuing to take care of. Where it
yeah,
wasn't before.
They addressed a lot of the same. Oh, sorry.
No, you go
they
ahead.
addressed a lot of the same points that Jamie and I have been bringing up in the meetings that a lot of the lawmakers did not know about or did not think about when they learned about these bills.
Well, one thing that I was just going to point out real quick, and I think everybody here understands it more than most, my original business model for our retail stores was to have a community caregiver spotlight in each of our stores, to take those caregivers from the community where I'm operating, find out who's doing it right and who's doing it the right way and who's got really great products and is doing right by patients, and then to give them an avenue to promote their brands and their efforts. And I'm convinced, and I think you guys will agree with me, if I had been allowed to build my model that way, I'd be more successful right now. I'd have more revenue coming through my stores. So the moment they removed the caregivers from the dispensaries was bad business for me personally, and I think
Patrick,
bad in general.
Patrick, that system, and I tried to make that point before, that system was always intended to fail. That's why the caregivers should have never been allowed to participate in it and rescue it. Had they not been allowed, it would have failed. The state would have had to come back to the table with a new system that would have worked. And maybe by then we would have had enough growers on board and things would have made a little more sense. I mean, things that it's interesting because other states post Michigan have now started to do things in the proper order so that they didn't have the problems that Michigan had because we were that guiding light.
Just go ahead, Adam.
No, I'm just saying it's unfortunate that the caregivers were the saviors, because it just goes to show, as Rick points out all the time, that there were a bunch of bad business plans out there, business models. And that one was created by the state, who should have known better. And
so for our viewers who aren't familiar with the history, let me just cover what we're talking about here. After the passage of the MMFLA, which is the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act, which was always intended to just be supplied by regulated industry, they had no regulated industry market. There were no flowers in the ground. There were no plants available. So they used the Michigan caregiver system to support that industry. Then when they launched legalization in 2018, they also had to continue to lean on the caregivers then, because the sales amounts were huge while plants, as you know, slowly build. It takes 4 months to grow a plant. So no matter how many square footage you put down, you're still 4 to 6 months away from a usable harvest. So caregivers provided an important crutch in order to support this system while it was in its infancy. And as Adam rightly mentions, other states have now slowed their introduction so that they let cultivation facilities start first, so plants are in the ground before you open retail centers, so that you're controlling supply and demand more as complementary as opposed to confrontational market forces. So that's a little bit of our history here. And caregivers were important then. And as Adam points out, if caregivers were not allowed to participate in that market, all of those people that initially put their dollars down to open stores would have all failed. And I think that would have been a lot of sad stories in Michigan for a lot of mom and pops and a lot of other people that tried to get into the market and invested their nest egg, their life savings, sometimes with people with dubious histories from other states who came here to take advantage of this new industry. I'll also point out, too, that many of the companies in the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association have received their funding from Canadian sources. The reason being, Canadian stock exchange allows the trade of cannabis industry stocks, whereas the American stock exchange doesn't. How that affects us is that if a caregiver sells a product to a patient, those guys live on the same street. All those dollars that are being rotated stay in the community, and they support the gas stations and the restaurants and the mortgages that the community has. But when you send those dollars to out-of-country investors, some of what we spend in regulated dispensaries doesn't come back to Michigan. It doesn't complete that circle of economic benefit that we talk about, which is so crucial to having a local supply chain. Prior to 2008, when we had the medical bills, Michigan was absolutely an import-only state. Yeah, we had cannabis cultivators. Don't get us wrong. We grew some Pincon and Paralyzer, baby. All right, that was good cultivation going on, but not to a degree where it was a significant part. We were always importing from other places, Mexico, Canada, California. Once we get the medical program in here, and 250,000 people right now have the ability to grow 12 plants each under the medical program. That's a lot of plants. And that stopped a lot of the imports. And the dollars that were spent by patients to their caregivers saved the economy here in Michigan. When we start to put those dollars out of state, they're not likely to come back. And I think we're going to look at an economic downturn because of the sourcing of the finances, or a financial sourcing from some of these larger industries. Patrick, you're involved on this at a level that none of the rest of us are. Am I too wrong on that, or is that kind of accurate?
No, I definitely think it's very accurate. And, it's obviously important that these dollars stay in this community. And that certainly is one of the reasons why I like to think our operation is a family operation, full of Michiganders that are in it for the long haul and trying to do things the right way. I'm very proud that we're not supported by big private equity groups or Canadian multinational groups and things like that, and never wanted our group to be associated with that. So, we've taken this the hard way, using friends and family money, using our own dollars, trying to build it small and grow it the right way, like we would a plant.
Yeah. Well, Ben Wallace came at, kind of a price tag, I'm sure, but the benefits of putting into a long-lasting partnership like that have got to be really just exciting. And when you look at taking a brand identity like a Ben Wallace can have, that's really got to be an amazing thing for the state of Michigan and for your company, Patrick.
Well, and it matters a lot that he lives in Birmingham, that he's local. So, he wants to stay apart. He's just been rehired by the Pistons as a special advisor, so he's involved with the team on a day-to-day basis. And Lord knows we'd love to have the Pistons become a powerhouse again. Michigan is ready for a winner. I know that. And, I love sports. I've always followed him throughout his career. And I think he's one of those guys that you want to get behind. He's in it for the right reasons in cannabis, same way he did when he was in his playing career.
So, Zahra, you're really involved in the Young Dems of Michigan and some of the Cannabis Caucus, the Cannabis Freedom Coalition. When we look at celebrity endorsements or celebrity brands like that, as a younger person, do you believe that really carries a lot of purchase power when you come to a retail environment? I believe it does.
I think it depends on the person, but yeah, it does give it some of that power. I mean, there are some people that really do care about that more than others, and they will look for product that's either endorsed or they see a celebrity using it. Mm-hmm. Especially with all the social media these days, that everything gets out on social media so quickly. I think that plays with the whole seeing a celebrity or talk about or do something.
Yeah. I know a lot of times what we've seen is cannabis companies try and attach themselves to former prisoners. White Boy Rick and Pleasantries is one of those relationships too. And when you talk about someone who's successful, like Ben Wallace and Rair, that's a great combination. But when I see a company that maybe has a bad reputation in the state trying to take cannabis felons under their wing in order to essentially treat them like a carbon credit, like, look at this great thing I'm doing here. I'm virtue signaling, doing something good, even though I'm actually doing terrible things in the back door. That always makes me a little bit nervous because I worry that cannabis felon might just be burned and turned. You know what I mean? You get them to sign up, and then you take them for everything they need, and then you just drop them, and now they're homeless. So
I hate to pick on your words, but who are these cannabis felons? I've seen one.
Well, I'm assuming I described
cannabis
white boy
felon.
Rick as a cannabis felon. He's not. He's a dope felon.
Which is, don't get me wrong, and I don't let people. I'm a huge fan of white boy Rick, but I'm not a fan of what he's doing in the weed game. I don't understand that. He wasn't in the weed game. I understand what it's like to bring gangsters into the weed game and use their celebrity. But I don't understand if they didn't have any connection to weed, why you would do that.
I think the fact he's a victim of the system, and
and I agree. And I'll be honest that his connection with Pleasantries just goes to show you how Rick Wershey is still being victimized by the system.
Well, they definitely, I don't think, made it clear to him that they were embroiled in such controversy, and I don't think they made it clear to him what their position was on caregivers, which is they think it's okay to peel back existing caregiver rights.
You know, Bradley in the chat mentions two other famous sports figures that have cannabis lines in Michigan: Darren McCarty and Calvin Johnson. Megatron, boy, what success stories those are! And I certainly imagine the Ben Wallace line having all the success that Darren McCarty's brand has. Calvin Johnson and Rob Sims are just doing a fantastic job.
And
they're on the board of MICAA, I think.
And they all seem to come by it honestly. Is what I'm trying to point out. Is that they all can sit down and tell you a story and explain how they got where they're at, and you're not going to be offended by the lack of knowledge they may have had or the misinformation they may have been given. You're going to understand how they got where they're at.
Well, I think all of us as cannabis users know that when these athletes used to get suspended for 6 games or a season because of cannabis, that is the biggest crime in the world, because these guys are being asked to take opioids and saying that's okay, but you can't use cannabis, which is actually healthy and really lets your body recover. The hypocrisy was insane. And these guys are know that more than any of us, because they really dealt with pain management issues that, I don't understand for sure. And I think a lot of us don't.
The war on drugs was predicated on an illogical prospect, and you can't look for logic within it. It always differentiated things that were harmful and gave them preference over things that were beneficial, which they made criminal. So,
hold on though. I will give the Olympic Committee props, because they have banned marijuana use because they consider it a performance enhancing substance. So in reality, while there's still this hatred on marijuana, it seems that they've accepted the fact that it actually has this positive side to it, and as a performance enhancer. And we all know when it comes to healing and things you were just talking about, Rick, and they kind of recognize that, which to me, when they came out with that statement, that was huge, even though it seemed to go in the wrong direction.
That's a 180. You're really talking about the Olympic Committee said absolutely not, all the way over to, yeah, it's so good, we have to still say no. It would be nice if in the middle of those two extremes there was a long period where they said, yeah, we don't care, right? I mean, I'd like to see Usain Bolt, burning after a run. Wouldn't that be great? Taking a
that's what's so
flag
funny
around
is
the
that
thing.
here's this organization that represents the fastest human beings on the planet and the most skilled at what they do, and they all come out to say that they're copious cannabis users and have been for their whole career.
So what we see here is the science of the 70s told us that cannabis use was going to destroy your lungs. It was just as bad as cigarettes. All the tars and the things would build up, and you'd be a wheezing mass by the time you were 40. But what we see in reality is an example of cannabis use that actually exceeds non-cannabis users in some instances when it comes to athletic performance. So how wrong was the science? Because it wasn't science. It was lies being justified by a laboratory.
Right.
Well,
And
and not to mention how many times, especially to kids, they said that this is going to kill your brain cells.
Well,
This is your
but
brain.
they told
This is
that
your,
lie.
the egg thing.
Carl Sagan.
The problem is
This is
they
your brain
told
on
that
drugs.
brain cell lie for 20 years after that study had been discredited. That's the sick part about this war on
They
drugs.
actually
IQ
suffocated
Right.
monkeys, deprived them of
Rhesus
oxygen, and killed their brain cells by.
Well,
how
so
they
that
treated them.
that line and the fact that it led you that it was something that would lead you to other drugs is what made it so scary and why I was so against it and what it started initially. Or else, like, if it had been for my dad, I would have been on it like 3 or 4 years before I actually started on it. But it was all that stuff that we learned about it.
I think a lot of people that do
This is gonna
marketing
kill you
cut their teeth on the drug war.
your lungs.
Breaking up a little bit.
Wow. Her point is well made. For a long time, we were told that it would kill brain cells. Recently, science may indicate that cannabis might help start brand new brain cells, a system that we didn't even think was possible in the human brain, but that we're seeing in vitro, in reality, right now with subjects.
The fact that it's known to kill cancer cells, unlike chemotherapy, which kills all cells. So, there's all kinds of things that now that science has finally flipped the switch, not only will they be learning, but it'll be validating what many of us have known for generations.
The cannabis industry is the undiscovered market. Millions and millions and millions of cannabis users across America have existed for decades. And now they've been attracted to us because of the monetary aspect. When we said all along they should have been attracted to us for a social justice aspect or for a healthcare aspect or just to be a good goddamn neighbor aspect, right? We don't want people to go to jail for victimless crimes. There's no one hurt when I consume cannabis, whether it was in 1990 or whether it's in 2021. Same effect, Society's slow to change, and maybe that's a good thing. But in some instances, we should be more rapid to change. And this is one where I think the science shows that we should be changing rapidly.
I have for many years compared this to the civil rights movement in many aspects. Not in the way of the struggle, of course, but the fact that laws change and attitudes take a while after that to change.
That we've seen it. There are these studies, these repackaged correlations being in framed to look as though they are causations to lots of issues, and oftentimes suggesting, of course, cannabis is a good thing, but you got to be very careful with it. You have to use it the right way, meaning it's got to be regulated and that type of stuff. There's been those types of studies that have come out for the last 2, 3, 4 years, it seems like, setting up the stage for keeping unnecessary regulations in place and being able to point to something that, or keeping the perception or the consciousness out there that there's some danger if we go past these safe regulations.
There's just so many. Go ahead, Adam.
I was just going to say, it's kind of like nobody wants to prove the truth to these people. I think this dinner that they're going to have in Lansing to educate lawmakers is a great idea. Okay. But you know what I'd like to have? I'd like to have a sesh with the lawmakers. I'd like to smoke down in front. No, really. Hold on.
No, I get it.
I want Zahra and all you guys to come, and I want to roll up a joint and pass one to you, and then we'll just show them how we sesh. And then you know what? I want somebody to overdo it. I want a few people to overdo it. All right. And I want them to see what happens at a sesh when everyday life happens. And this is what cannabis use is. And this is what happens when, Rick Thompson, he gets a little hold of that extra wax and takes too many, and maybe Patrick
He thinks he can fly.
Right. Well, maybe Patrick's like my good friend Daryl, who takes 2-3 hits of a joint and he's done.
Oh, don't
I don't know.
like that. That's mean.
No, but the point is that these legislators have never seen this. Okay. And if they have, they forgot what it is and what it looks like. Because we all know the truth, and we all know that they can't come up with examples of the lies they're telling. None of us are afraid.
No,
that
there
our
are no
children
victims.
Are going to get a hold of our weed.
Right. There's no health concern going on. It's
Go ahead,
just
Zahra.
fabricated hysteria.
Yeah, let us just get enough no votes on this, and then we'll talk about your idea.
Yeah, no.
Let's secure our votes in the House of Representatives. What Adam says is really valid. There are so many ways we can metric our success right now. One of the ways in Michigan is the number of county prosecutors refusing to process cannabis crimes, even if there's a technical violation. If I'm allowed as a walking around citizen 12 plants in my house, maybe I got 15. Technically a violation, but is it worth any police action? No. So we have prosecutors that are ahead of the game and law enforcement that's really slow to change. So when we have the difference between a progressive prosecutor and an old school law enforcement, that's where the friction comes in. And that's what drives the legislature to try and take action, because everybody's not on the same page anymore. The fact is, we got to get rid of those old school law enforcement guys and go with the progressive.
So
well, maybe.
Go ahead.
Maybe we can just encourage more crime, and then those law enforcement guys will have other things to do.
I don't think that's the right message to send.
Okay, it seems to be. It seems
Hey,
to be
all strategies should be on the table right now.
Oh yeah, it seems to be about law enforcement, and it's amazing how in the 10, 15 years of legalized weed, how many times law enforcement has decided at the last minute to open the door and walk back in and say, hey, wait. What about us? Mm-hmm. We used to be a big part of this thing, and you took away our revenue. You took away our ability to arrest people and get in their cars because it stunk. What's left for us?
Yeah. Focus on rapes. That's what's left for you. Focus on
jaywalkers, dude. I don't care. Just stay away from the weed. And I crossed the corner for the record.
No, I mean, there's a lot within the system that needs changing. I mean, really, a lot of the stuff that cops do handle should not be handled by cops. There's a lot of stuff that should be handled, especially when it comes to instances of like issues of mental health and things like that. Those do not need an armed cop who, a lot of them, I mean, we do have good cops, but a lot of them are just so quick to respond. They're not needed in these spaces. So our whole criminal justice system needs reforming. And there's a lot of things that were for a time before that are not needed now.
Well, we have so many mental health institutions in Michigan that have been shut down over the last 20 years or 30 years that there were a lot of people who wouldn't be walking around on the street today that would normally be institutionalized that are walking around on the street because we shut down those institutions.
And not to mention the fact that so many people do not get checked out and do not realize what issues they have or get attention because of the lack of medical health insurance that so many people don't have access to. So that's another thing that drives a lot of this is our whole system, and a lot of it needs reform.
Yeah. When there was single payer health insurance and your employer took care of you like they valued you for a lifelong partner, then people got mental health because they had a way to do it without coming out of their pocket. But when money has to come out of your pocket for healthcare, oftentimes those decisions are put off in favor of other things, food, your children that needs new school clothes. There's a million things to spend money on other than going to the doctor. If you're living on the knife's edge of making bills or not making bills. So when we talk about responsible action in the cannabis industry, there are a lot of regulated firms that actually pay a living wage to their people that take care of folks. Patrick, you at Rair, I've heard nothing but good things about the way that you treat your people.
Well, we try, but that's about being humans first. That's what this is all about, right? And obviously, I find it as rewarding as any financial compensation to know that I've helped someone's life who was worse before working for me. And sharing in our successes has always been a part of my business model whatever the business is. And that's how business really is sustainable. If you're thinking about greed and grabbing the quick buck and taking it all for yourself, your business will not be successful for long.
Yeah. And really, go ahead, Adam. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think Rick has mentioned this before. One of the problems right now is that some of these guys I don't think are necessarily thinking about greed. What I think they're thinking about is making their next payment. And they're getting investors who are wanting to know where the money's at. And I think that's what's happening right now, is that a lot of these, multi-state operators that are coming in and sucking up as many different venues as they can are really just looking to make that next payment and move along as fast as they can, because they know at some point that the money's going to keep coming in and they're going to actually finally, be able to make that nut and not have a problem. And not struggle.
It's a good time to talk about the sale leaseback program that plagues the cannabis industry, not just in Michigan, but all across the nation. And a sale leaseback, you could build up an entire store with all your fixtures and everything else too, and then you're short on money. So what you do is you sell all of those physical attributes to an outstate company who gives you a bunch of money, and then they lease all that stuff back to you. So you got a one-time lump sum, but now you have an additional monthly obligation that you have to satisfy. And with some of these REITs, it's been reported they have annual escalating interest rates. So you may have gotten into a good deal in 2018, but it's now 2021, and your interest rate has been raised 3 times, and you're not receiving the return on investment that you thought. Your shareholders from your Canadian funding are really breathing down your neck for extra profits. You're finding that your brand is maybe boycotted in the state by, guys like Medical Mondays and Jamie and Adam and myself. So now you're really in a jam where you're facing a situation where you have wow, I really have this wonderful thing.
Yeah.
So you really have this situation where it's a bright sunshiny day in Michigan and it's coming through my skylight. You have a situation where you're really talking about not being able to make the bills, and not being able to make the bills means all of your employees don't get paid. These multi-million-dollar facilities that you've got have to go idle. All of the community investment that was done just washed away. So they'll make any kind of deal with any kind of devil in order to keep that from happening. But the problem is you can solve that problem in September, but it comes up back again in December and then again in February. It never goes away because you don't solve the underlying issue, which is your poor business arrangements. And if you want to change the world every time you can't pay your bills, I'm sorry, I'm the world. I don't want you to do that. Fuck you. Go under. And unfortunately, in the cannabis industry, some of these larger companies are either going to have to be gobbled up by others, or they're just going to have to go under. And I don't want anybody to lose their job, but by the same token, that's what corporate America does. You either gobble up the weak, or the weak close shop. So, I mean, I'm not trying to forecast anybody's demise. It's not my gig. That's not what I do, by the way. It's not real books, folks. But the fact is, in any industry, this is going to happen.
Absolutely. You don't have one of those sale leaseback deals.
I beg your pardon?
I'm glad I don't have one of those sale leaseback deals. I've seen the terms on them. They're not pretty.
So you understand what I'm saying then, Patrick, right? I mean, this is a real issue in the industry, right?
Yeah, and they're everywhere all over Michigan. There's a lot of them. There's a big group out there that's writing a lot of these deals. And not only does it have this increasing interest rate, it has a 20-year period, but this is the huge part. There are prepayment penalties. You do not have an out. So these things are ironclad arrangements where you're in it for the long haul. And if you want to pay off the loan, you're paying off the interest for 20 years ahead. So,
and do you think that they anticipated just big profits by now and they didn't come?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think people project it when you're first to market that you gain such an advantage that your income projections are way beyond what someone who's second to market would have. And I don't think those ever got realized in Michigan.
And I think many of these people thought they would have stores open in the city of Detroit at this point.
I think that's valid too.
And certainly don't and won't for a while. So
City of Detroit, as we mentioned previously in the broadcast, a medical only city. They tried to institute a regulation which would allow adult use businesses like retail centers and cultivation in the city, but that was ruled unconstitutional by a judge. So they have to start over. It was a couple of years they invested in making the first one. So it's going to be a while before they get another one set up that may pass court muster.
Well, I heard from Councilman Tate actually last week. I was at a clean smoke meeting put on by Najanava, and it was
Wonderful person, wonderful.
Yeah, it was excellent. And he showed up, and he did mention before he left that there wouldn't be something going on by the end of this year, but there is stuff just about ready to go. There's just not enough time this year to do it, but early next year they're going to be getting to it.
James Tate said that for 18 months before they get the other room.
Is he going to put the poison pill back in it?
So the poison pill
legislation is only fun if it has the poison pill in it.
The poison pill Adam's mentioning for our viewers is a clause that requires or that gives preferential treatment to certain Detroit residents based on a variety of factors. That's the part of it that was ruled unconstitutional previously. But it's very popular in the city because it gives a social equity opportunity to many Detroit residents, although not all Detroit residents, which is what got them in trouble.
Rick, would you run down the substitute and the additional bills that were part of the committee hearing and getting voted out today real quick?
I sure will. Now, remember, there are 6 bills that affect cannabis that were voted out of committee today: 5300, 01, and 02, 5319, 20, and 21. 5300, 01, 02, 19, and 21 are all tie-barred, meaning that if one fails, they all fail. 19 and 21 essentially take away the user tax that the Department of Treasury put on cannabis caregivers and patients back, or use tax, not user tax, but a use tax back in 2018. Not a bad deal. 5320 is just a technical correction, which really doesn't have anything to do with anybody anywhere, but it is a technical correction in the language of law. 5300, 5301, and 5302 were voted out of committee today. The amendment that was made to both 5300 and 5301 would change the proposal from going from 5 caregivers at 60 plants down to 5 patients at 60 plants down to 1 patient at 12 plants. Would now allow you to continue to keep 5 patients, but it would restrict your plant count only to 24. So although it's a concession in the number of patients that could be serviced, it's not really a concession in the number of plants to the degree that we consider it to be acceptable.
It still doesn't work. It still, probably makes a caregiver have to decide where to direct those, what resources they now have available to them.
It doesn't make any more sense than the last.
And it was done without any input from those who should be at the table, being a part of these discussions.
If someone asked me what I thought at that table, I might suggest that they increase to 10 patients and allow 30 plants per patient. I mean, why can't we go in the other direction?
Yeah, I agree. Let's face it, not every patient requires 12 plants. 60 plants is an amount that most people with 5 patients don't grow. Jamie Lowell is fond of saying, you're not limited by the number of plants you can grow. You're limited by the space you can grow in. So if you have a basement, it doesn't matter if they give you a 30 plant allocation. If you can only grow 10 because that's all you got, then that's your physical limitation. So these numerical values are something to make lawmakers feel good, but they don't really always translate into a restriction that's applicable to most people.
So Jen's asking if it would be 24 plus 12, and I just would think so if the caregiver was a patient, him or herself.
Yeah, that's typically when we talk about having 60 plants, oftentimes the number 72 is used. What that means is you, as a caregiver, you can take care of your 5 plants at 60 total, plus yourself could be a patient, which would give you an additional 12 plant allowance. It seems to me like that additional 12 plant allowance would still happen on top of the 24 plants from a caregiver, just like it currently is. So that would potentially give you a 36 plant option as opposed to 72, which is technically 50% of what they originally want. His homie standing there blocking it. 300 plants. Yeah, says Buddy Dalton. Buddy Dalton biocultivation, one of the most successful indoor gardening stores in the state.
I think I was blocking people trying to give you a little bit of shit here. Let me get caught up.
But one of the things, I mean, if they amended for the caregivers only 24 plants, wouldn't that for the patient themselves be less than 12 plants right now?
I didn't understand that question. I'm sorry.
I mean, like you said, it will be the 24 plus the 12 for the patient, but wouldn't the patient themselves have a reduced plant count as well if they're
That's not
growing?
proposed right now, but it could be added in the Senate. One of the things that we're talked about here is that if you're reducing caregivers and they're only 30,000, that's one thing, but there are 250,000 patients too. So it stands to reason that if their goal is to reduce the number of plants being grown in homes across Michigan, that when it comes to the Senate, they'll probably try and chop a regular patient's plant allowance also. That's what we're afraid of.
And they start here. It ends up eventually with home grows from the MRTMA.
Yeah.
It ends up with smaller businesses. It ends up, I mean, like not just micro businesses, anything that is not them. Their trend is to go after any activity that is not them. And I just wouldn't be surprised. This is just the tip of the iceberg for where the strategy goes if they can get away with it.
Well, there are so many different aspects of this particular issue. It's not hard to understand why lawmakers don't really have a grasp of the entire viewpoint, because there's so many different ways to look at it. But there's just some basic information that lawmakers should have. Having a 60 plant allowance doesn't mean you're growing 60 plants. Having 5 patients means you have 5 sick people that look to you for support. You can't really just ditch 4 of them.
When there was some discussion about getting additional patients for caregivers, Buddy Dalton says 300 plants. Yeah, and that's good. And we've said this before for perspective. Just because you can have X number of plants doesn't mean you've got the resources, the space, the ability, the desire, the need. I mean, they're there, I guess, if something comes up and you have to go use them all, but doesn't automatically mean that you just max it out and then
Well, and we've had a couple
have the space and resources to do it. Go ahead, Rick. Sorry.
No, Jamie, you answer this one. There's a couple questions about caregivers co-locating at facilities, which is something I think you'll agree has basically been decided on a city by city basis, right?
As far as the warehouse requirement and the zoning requirement for the new license?
No. Currently, caregivers co-locating 2 caregiver grows on one property.
I would agree with that, and I think that's closer to what DeRuyter was talking about, even though it's being used now to try to even kick caregivers out of homes and things like that. But
DeRuyter's a court decision which allowed municipalities to regulate caregivers, even though for 11 years we didn't have any regulations allowed by the local authorities because everybody in the whole planet, including the Michigan Supreme Court, read the law to say that they didn't have the ability to do that. So.
Here's a good question too. How many other states? There are people. Obviously, every state deals with big money interests trying to advantage themselves in one way or another. Rick and I met with some lobbyists, some representatives of big brands that have their products in grow stores and things like that, and they realize that they could be compromised with the passage of these bills. And they were saying they've never seen anything like this before. And just the total attempt at decimating this other program,
well, but we have a unique program compared to most states. So, it is every state out west, at least, has gone through major change over the years because their systems that were set up sucked. And they had to
that's true. It could just be relative to our
they
more
had to
like
redo them, just like I
system.
suggested Michigan would have had to if they didn't have this caregiver system that saved them.
I wanted to bring something up from that before, but I know that Patrick only has so much time, and it's just about time when he's got to jump off. Did you want to leave us with anything, Patrick, and direct anybody to your stores?
Just to thank you guys. Really appreciate the time and the conversation. It really does matter to me so much, especially now that I'm an operator, to make sure that we're all trying to do the right thing. But yeah, very, very thankful for the opportunity. Rair is a brand that supports caregivers. We support no changes. They're not my competition. They're a part of all of our same cause to bring cannabis to more people and to help people's lives. So I appreciate the opportunity. And certainly, if you do want to check us out and support a brand that does things the right way, check out rairco.com, RAIRCO.com. Thank
Where
you
are
so
your
much.
stores
Guys.
at, Patrick?
We have stores in Bay City, Big Rapids, Lowell, and Muskegon, and then Centerline and Kalamazoo coming on board first quarter next year.
Sounds
Cool.
good.
Thanks a lot, man.
so much,
Really
everybody.
appreciate it. Congratulations with the Big Ben deal. That's exciting. And,
You'll see more announcements on that coming up in the next couple of weeks.
we'll have you back on before too long. Thanks a lot. Talk to you
Thank
soon.
you. Bye-bye.
You know, when we talk about the industry, there's some solid representatives of regulated businesses. We don't want to paint an image as if all regulated businesses are trying to corrupt what we do here with the caregiver system. Tom Beller, Patrick Frakes, those are two great examples of people working within our existing laws in order to be successful and not trying to upset the apple cart.
Yeah, wouldn't mind adding Russ Chambers in our team.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, Botanical Company's been great. Talk about a philanthropic organization. They've
A lot of the stuff that Patrick was talking about. That's why I think that companies like that, like Patrick's, like Franklin Fields Botanical Company, Rare, we should be the community of businesses. That type of like-minded approach.
Let's just give some credit for a second. There have been Skymint, formerly known as Green Peak, is one of those boycotted companies that's part of the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association. And due to our pressure as a community, Skymint has been excluded from certain events and certain things they've tried to participate in over this last summer. They were bounced off a banner position that I believe Boco took over afterwards. There was a sponsorship that they were going to have in the Niles Festival that I think they got bounced out of, and Rair Cannabis stepped in to take over for that. So, I mean, we've been successful. Jamie, am I wrong about those facts?
But Botanical Company took over for a sponsorship spot for that Loom had.
Oh, my apologies. Yeah,
Yeah.
Another boycotted company.
Yeah.
The same thing, just different name.
Hey
Yeah,
guys,
same shit.
I got to jump. I appreciate you having me on this week, but I got to go do dinner with my mom.
Good for you, Adam.
Thank you.
All right, Adam, have a good night, man.
All right.
Bye, Adam.
You guys take care. Be well.
Thanks. So, what a great dialogue we've had. And you know what? I mean, we've had wonderful guests, but the chat today has been just amazing. Great questions, way to inspire conversation, and really to maybe get a different angle on stuff. So, Frakes, Patrick, that's great. Zahra, you're doing so many things. What would you like to talk about in these last few minutes we have on the show?
Just about turning more people up for the lobby day, and just keep, I think, like, the pressure is working. Just keep, emailing and requesting meetings or phone call with your elected officials. What Jamie and I mostly have met has been with, like, the Democratic representatives, and others have met, has mainly been with the Democratic representatives. But we also got to reach out to our Republican legislator as well and see what we can get going with them.
DeMoose was a no today.
Representative DeMoose, a Republican on the committee that voted today.
Okay.
And Bellino, who was on the committee, was in opposition during when there was testimony. But I think he was in favor today. In fact, I know he was.
If you know that a proposal is going to pass and that your no vote is mostly symbolic, a lot of times people will vote yes, even though they're mentally in a no state of mind, simply because they know that they don't want to sever relationships with a very important committee chairman who they may need in order to pass their favored bills later on. It's kind of a sick game, the way that they play with laws in the legislature. So,
Yeah, that's once again, we need so much reform in our system. And a lot of these laws, the way everything is done, but one thing at a time.
So a question was asked about the dinner that we've talked about earlier today. Invitations were handed out today. Someone asked how many representatives were invited to the dinner the educational dinner we're doing in November. And Ryan Bringold, who's the mastermind of that whole program, answered very succinctly, all of them. Everyone, more than 100 today got invitations to the special dinner. Republican, Democrat, Independent, Didn't matter.
110. And there'll be some people who we know are already on our side, so to speak, there, but they still don't have all the information that we're going to offer, and they can have better conversations with others, by learning a little bit more about it. And,
even
it's a really good idea.
Educating them about the bills is important, but just educating them about cannabis means that they'll be better able to make decisions on all of the cannabis bills that come forward, not just in 2021, but all of them next year. And there's usually a bunch of them in an election year as people are trying to virtue signal. But most of these people have long careers. You can do 3 stints as a representative and 2 stints as a senator in Michigan with term limits. So if we give them good information at the beginning of their time in the legislature, that knowledge sticks with them throughout their entire career.
So we've had a couple of really nice acknowledgments. I just want to mention, Spartan Grown here, giving us some props for the information, and of course, he's part of a really great show, Bros Grow Show, that offers a lot of great information as well. Go ahead, Zahra.
No, I was going to say, I mean, and hopefully with this dinner is that next time they do sit down to craft any bills, they'll know who to reach out to.
Right. And Latrish Mason there, as well as Amy Carter, Susan Fisher, Wes Promical.
Spent all day.
Okay. So many people went on that tour today, Eric Gunnels, I believe, in order to deliver those 100 or so invitations. That was a nice little cadre of people to walk around. It's amazing how much more attention you get when someone walks in that's visibly ill. It's sad, but it is effective as a message.
So Michael says the sad thing is they're changing the minds of the yes votes. And I think that might be true for maybe most of them. But I have an example of just yesterday where we were able to have a meeting with some people who did not have some information, and they were moved. And they were going to be in support of these bills today, and they moved to a neutral position.
Zahra's personal story, I know for a fact because I watched it happen. Zahra's personal story of healing has changed people's minds on a local leadership level, on a municipal level, and also on a state government level. When you see the emotion in someone's eyes, they tell you how they were sick and how they're not as sick now. You can't buy that experience. You can't counter it with just misinformation. Once they believe forever. And people like Zahra, Ida Lee, who brought her daughter to the legislature, and unfortunately she's not with us anymore. Again, Tanya Kay, young Anastasia today. Those are the images that sometimes make a big difference.
And I think that's like what really prompted me to start speaking about cannabis, is because I was so against it and just started it to get another brain surgery. So because of all the misinformation. So that's why I felt it was important to share my story, even though I hate public speaking.
Yeah, but you know what? You do a great job of it. You understand what you're talking about. You live it. And let's go down the quick list of the political groups and the cannabis organizations and things that you're working with.
So Michigan NORML and Motor City NORML. So I sit on the board for both of them. The chair of the Cannabis Caucus, Secretary of Young Democrats of Michigan, DNC delegate, and then on the legislator with for the Michigan Legislative Cannabis Caucus. I don't know. I might be forgetting
Cannabis
something.
Freedom Coalition.
Yeah, the Freedom Coalition. Yeah.
We covered most of them, but just to reiterate that
You were an office holder in Young Dems too at one point.
Yeah, Secretary of Young Dems. Yeah. And then trying to start the conversation at the DNC about starting something cannabis related. So we'll see how
That's
that
a
goes.
Democratic National Conference.
Yeah, you're a national delegate.
Yeah.
Very cool.
When we have good messengers carrying our message forward, it's easier for people to believe. Good.
Is there anything in particular, Zahra, that you want to include in the conversation before we have to start signing off?
No, I think just make sure to check out the advocacy groups that are fighting for this and support them if there's something you're looking to support something. I mean, Michigan NORML, Americans for Safe Access, the Cannabis Caucus, all of those groups have been fighting to make sure these laws don't get into place. So for people that are looking, and MICIA. So for people, if you're ever looking at organizations to support or look to, those are all great organizations. And I know there's many others.
And I just want to put out too that we are up against a very formidable challenge here. They are being very successful in changing people's minds and even getting possibly the supermajority. That it takes. But we've also very rarely, or maybe never, have had so many groups and organizations be so active at the right time and working together so well at the right time. We can do this, and this is one of the reasons why. I mean, there's new groups that have formed, there's old groups that have gotten re-energized, there's old groups that have reformed. There's a lot of stuff going on right now, and we seem to be doing a good job together in spite of some of the criticisms of infighting and stuff like that. I feel pretty good about what we're doing overall.
Yeah, and for anybody, for all those that are listening, even if we have, or you think your elected official is a no vote, or keep emailing them until we get rid of these bills completely, because the more that they get that people are in opposition, the more likely they are listen to that and vote in that way.
Just remember, every yes vote is one story away from being a no vote. And is it your story that makes a difference? Put yourself in a position to tell your tale to lawmakers, because you never know what's going to spark them. It could be that their elderly father or mother had a similar condition and that they identify with your success story. Or maybe they've had concerns about their own health. And when they hear you talk about it, maybe they see a pathway towards a better lifestyle for themselves personally. But every yes vote on these bills is just one story away from being a no vote. Be the person that tells that story.
Well,
that must be good because you guys are quiet.
Wow. Yeah, just soaking it in, and
okay. Me too. Soaking myself in.
And Spartan and others are concurring. We have to stay active. I mean, this is going to be really a long, tough haul. There's so many options and black ops and people who know what they're doing out there. This is a challenge. We got to stay at it. We have to have some energy here, throughout.
Yeah, and just the way they sped these through and try to basically not let anybody be there. I mean, for today's meeting, it was at the last second. So if if you're not anywhere close or you don't have rides, a lot of people can't make it. So
what Zahra's talking about is typically a regulatory reform committee would post their agenda on Friday, telling us exactly what's going to happen on a Tuesday meeting. In this instance, they didn't post the agenda until 3:45 in the afternoon on Monday for a meeting that took place at 10:30 in the morning on Tuesday. That's the kind of dirty tricks that the legislature does when they know they're trying to pass something unpopular and they don't want people to show up to resist. And Ryan Bringold is bringing to our attention a lot of people who stepped up. Let's give some credit. GC3 in the chat. He's also talking about Andy Carson and Courtney. Great job for that. Ryan also said John Wright. Good for you. Vehicle City. We love all you guys. Thanks so much for your assistance in trying to help make this dinner for the House Representatives a reality. It's not inexpensive to feed those folks. And it's not just the reps that we're asking to show. We want them to each bring one or two people from their office, because the more people that get this information, the better we all will be. Mm-hmm. So thank you. Spartan Grown, good job. Ryan Bringold, Vehicle City, Michael Timmons, never know what they've gone through or what a family member of theirs has. Amazing. Yep. So we're doing great with this. It's just about time, Jamie.
It is just about time.
I've never met with Steve Linder, by the way. Anybody that tells you that's a fucking liar. So bye. Enjoy your little lifetime of not being trusted by anybody who reads your words.
People saw him come up and talk to you at the other thing, and think
It's
I
not
think
a
it was
private
something-
meeting. In a hallway for 30 seconds, some motherfucker says, "Give me your card because I want to open a dialogue." And I say, "Fuck you, but here's a card." That's not a private meeting. I'm sorry, Zahra. I'm just bad today.
Are you sure you guys were not whispering secretly to each other?
Oh yeah. While all these eyes were watching us, right, in this hallway where there's no escaping, there's no shadows or nothing to hide behind. Sure. Yeah. So whatever. That's okay. People gotta hate, and it's easy to hate people who are on top of the game. The three of us here, I mean, we've sometimes draw critics. It's okay. It's part of being who you are. So. And thanks to everybody who did all that awesome work today, distributing those invitations to the November 9th dinner. Good stuff. Jane Stewart thinks I'm funny, by the way. So, ha. All right. Jamie, we're just about done.
All right, let's get a great job all in. Thanks, everybody. There's a bunch of people who were on the show, of course. We appreciate all that. We'll do it again next week, and we'll still be talking about this at least to some degree. And, that's just where we are right now. But, Rick, you want to finish it up in any way? Sign us off?
Well, I'll tell you what. Today, after the meeting, I was not at my best. I was sad. I was a little disappointed that all the people that came there to testify didn't get a chance to. Clearly, they had more than an hour of meeting time that was available to them, and they dismissed early. They had lots of time to do that. But talking to everyone today, having the dialogue, hearing Patrick being willing to share his personal story of healing, how can you not be uplifted by this? And all the wonderful people in the chat, except for the one bad guy, but all the rest of the people in the chat, right? It's just, we're part of an amazing thing, this cannabis community. They can't regulate us out of existence. They can't pass rules that make us stop doing what we're doing. But it should be easier. And I think by continuing commuting, we make it easier for ourselves and easier for our children. So keep pushing forward and being the badasses that you all are, because this is how we make progress. And I'm really proud of what we've done today. Thank you.
Right on. All right, Jazz Cabbage Cafe. Thanks, Zahra. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, guys.
See ya.
Yeah.